Will you pray with me? God of all, we sit in these strange and wonderful stories, wondering where we are in them. Give us faith to see. Amen. I want to thank the Master Singers again for coming today. Their music was very inspiring and beautiful, and let's give them a hand again. And it kind of struck me as I was listening to the music, and it was uplifting my soul. What a strange combination to have music like that on the same day that we're talking about doubt, you know? Because that music doesn't have doubt in it, right? It would be a totally different song if we put that music to, I don't know if I believe in God, you know? It just wouldn't do it, right? And that's the thing I used to say in my life as I began to have my faith began to evolve, that I can sing things that I can't say. And that's because music in many ways reaches us in a very different space than readings or preachings. It reaches us in a space where we experience God in a way that we can't really explain. It's what we call ineffable. And so through my life, I have always said, I'm going to continue to sing things that I can't really say, because that is when God is truly with me. But we'll go back to this story of the doubting Thomas, and I'm just going to introduce a theme that we're going to come back to over and over in the next few weeks. And this theme is honest faith and honest doubt. Because one goes with the other. And so I look at Thomas, and I really feel like he's been given a bad rap over the years, And I associate with him in many ways. When I was a little girl, there was a song that we used to sing, and the only song we ever sang about Thomas. And this is how it went. It went, why worry when you can pray? Trust Jesus, he'll be your stay. Don't be a doubting Thomas, trust fully on his promise. Why worry, 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 worry when you can pray? Does anyone know that song? Yeah. It's not a United Church song. That I know. Don't be and when we used to sing it, I was singing like grade 1, don't be a doubting Thomas, Like that was the worst thing in the world, was to be a doubting Thomas. But the interesting thing about that story is, if you remember in the first part, that Easter Sunday day, Jesus appears to the disciples. And it wasn't until he showed his wounds that they began to believe, it says, right? So why doesn't Thomas get the same privilege? Why can't he also see before he believes? Well, I think he can, and he did. And after he saw and believed, he makes this statement, as Bob says, the first declaration of the faith of the people that surround the book of John. My Lord and my God. That's the first time in John that someone makes that declaration. You're also my God and not just my Lord. So Thomas's doubt led him to a place of declaration that those first disciples hadn't even made. But I think it was a process for him, and it mirrors kind of the process of faith. When I was little, I sang that song, and I spent all my time, and a lot of people in my church did, finding answers, right? You got a question, here's an answer. You don't know if you believe in God? Trust, pray. There was always a reason or an answer to any question that you had that would bring you back into this strong faith, no doubt. Well, later in my life, actually, as I went to university, at a Christian university, and started delving deeper into the scriptures, started understanding that it's a bit more complicated than I was led to believe when I was young. I really started to doubt whether I had any faith left in me at all. I think a lot of people go through that when they go to university or they start thinking about what they've learned, and they start to question and they wonder, is there any place for this? And then a friend of mine, we were kind of, this happens in college, right? You all question everything. She gave me this poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson, actually. And he had lost a friend who was only 22 years old. And he writes this poem in memoriam. It's a long thing, as he struggles with faith and doubt. And this is sort of one of the sections that I want to read for you. You say, but with no touch of scorn, sweet-hearted you, whose light blue eyes are tender over drowning flies. You tell me doubt is devil-born. I know not. One indeed I knew, in many a subtle question versed, who touched a jarring lyre at first, but ever strove to make it true. Perplexed in faith, but pure in deeds, at last he beat his music out. There lives more faith in honest doubt, believe me, than in half the creeds. He fought his doubts and gathered strength. He would not make his judgment blind. He faced the specters of the mind and laid them. Thus he came at length to find a stronger faith, his own. And power was with him in the night, which makes the darkness and the light, and dwells not in the light alone, but in the darkness and the cloud, as over Sinai's peaks of old, while Israel made their gods of gold, although the trumpet blew so loud. And I read that, she sent that to me, and I got to tell you, I found a lot of hope in that, and particularly in this line. There lives more faith in honest doubt, believe me, than in half the creeds. And so I asked myself, what is honest doubt? How can you have honest doubt? Kind of goes back to what Marcus Borg used to say. He had these three stages of faith development, and he called the first stage the pre-critical stage. The pre-critical stage was the why worry when you can pray stage. You got answers to everything. Everything they told you in Sunday school is absolutely true, and please don't tell me anything that will disrupt that because it's too disturbing for me. That is pre-critical faith. And then you move into this phase, many people, that they call critical faith. And that's when people, they go to college or they read a book that maybe, their mother wished they hadn't, like I did. And you start to question. And see, the problem is in a pre-critical faith, it's a house of cards. You build this faith out of cards. And if you pull one out, it starts to crumble. And you pull out another one and another one. Pretty soon, you're left with a whole bunch of cards on the ground. And your house is gone. In critical faith, you question everything. Everything. But Marcus Borg says there's another phase that we move to, if we're honest. And that's called post-critical faith. And in that space, you take the why worry when we can pray. And you take the science has a lot to say in our world, and you put them together. And there's a tension, and there's a tension, but they dwell together. So when I thought about this honest doubt and honest faith, it took me to this idea that there's dishonest doubt and dishonest faith. Let me give you an example. I had a friend who's more conservative than I am, and you know what? That's okay. One thing we have here at McDougall is a big tent. So wherever you are in this space, that is okay. God is with you. But she was on the more conservative end, and we were talking about dinosaurs, actually. And the kids were learning about dinosaurs, and she wanted to make sure that at the school that they also had the other side other than evolution, and that was all fine. And then she said she believed that dinosaurs died with the flood. And I'm like, but science says dinosaurs and people never lived together. So how is that possible? And then we talked about the creation of the world. And she said the world was made in 6 days. And I said to her, well, what do you mean by a day? And she's like, the sun comes out 24 hours. And I was like, but in the 6-day creation, we didn't have a sun or a moon till the 3rd day. So how can we have a 24-hour day? That's just a question I ask, right? And that was a conundrum for her, and an honest one. And she said to me finally, well, I believe God created the earth in 6 24-hour days because God can do anything. And I was like, okay. And this is what I said. I believe that story tells us that it was a mindful creation and that God created the world in a considered way and in a loving way. That's what it says to me. Here we have 2 different aspects of how that creation story happened. But I don't think it's honest to look at it and just excuse the idea that you can have a 24-hour day before there's a sun and a moon with a God can do anything. Why does God have to create the world in a 24-hour day? You see? That is almost in what I would call dishonest faith. Dishonest faith refuses to accept anything that would take away from what you want to believe. That's the box faith, if you ask me. Okay? But then you have dishonest doubt too. And this I see on this Facebook page that I'm associated with called Theists and Atheists. And someone signed me up. They are so far from each other. It's just this conversation that's happening where no one is listening. But there was this picture that an atheist posted, and it said, "Dear religion, pics or it didn't happen. Sincerely, science." And I'm like, pictures or it didn't happen? How can that be honest doubt? Science cannot answer all the questions of the world, of life, of meaning, of purpose, of love. That is the aspect of religion. So that's dishonest doubt. And so I say we can and we should live in this space where we hold honest faith, where aspects of science can be taken and we can say, yeah, maybe that's true. The world was not created in 6 24-hour days. That's true. And it wasn't created 5,000 years ago either. That is true. That doesn't make me lose my faith. That is an honest doubt. An honest faith says, but God was mindful. An honest faith says, I have experienced Jesus risen. And I can say, my Lord and my God. May it be so.